So today we have Geraint Hughes, isn't that right?
Yes, that's right.
All right, perfect. And Geraint has performed an experiment to test the validity of the greenhouse effect of climate alarmism. Because of course, climate alarm, climate science, the entire field pretty much is based on this idea of the greenhouse effect, or a radiative greenhouse effect in the atmosphere, which they postulate is required because, as I've shown in my theoretical work, they've basically written the sun out of creating the climate, is what they've done. And so they've created this silly little greenhouse effect idea where heat recycles itself and amplifies itself to create a higher temperature. So it has been, we've been having this debate for a long time about the faulty, fraudulent science of climate theory. Climate science has been going on for some time. And one thing you have to realize is that there is no actual experimental evidence for their side, for the alarmist side. There actually exists no experimental evidence for the basis of their theory, which is this greenhouse effect idea in the atmosphere, this radiative greenhouse effect idea. There is no experimental evidence for that. All that they have, rather, is interpretations through their position that the sun doesn't create the climate. So from there, they create all these interpretations that all this weather we see has to do with humans and carbon dioxide. That's all that they do, is they've created a bunch of interpretations. And they just say, see the sea level rising over here? Oh, that's from humans. See the forest burning over here? Oh, that's from humans. And they even say, see the snow over here? That's from humans. It's just become, it's just a totally ridiculous fraudulent science. So the point of the slayers in PSI was always to go to the fundamental science and to look at the basic theory. And so when you do that, you get led directly to this radiative greenhouse effect in the atmosphere, which is not the greenhouse effect of an actual greenhouse. They simply took that name out of convenience because everybody knows that a greenhouse is warm. So they took that name out of convenience and came up with some totally different, totally unrelated scheme that they pretend exists in the atmosphere, which makes the atmosphere warm itself up with because the sun doesn't warm the atmosphere or the surface, basically, in their theory. So anyway, you analyze this theory and you realize it's a bunk. If you go back in history, the relevant experimentation has been performed for hundreds of years, beginning with Joseph Fourier, who's basically the father of modern thermodynamic theory. Him and his friend de Saussure performed hot box experiments. They never found evidence for this radiative greenhouse effect that should exist in the atmosphere. There was a fellow named R.W. Wood around the early 1900s, I think. He performed some salt plate experiments in a hot box, which should have demonstrated the radiative greenhouse effect. They did not show. There's a fellow who's a member of the Slayers very early on, and a founder, I think, of PSI, Principia Scientific International, and Nassif Nale, I think he's a Mexican fellow. And he performed a very good suite of experiments, and they did not demonstrate the radiative greenhouse effect. And so, of course, all this is known, but they don't allow this sort of stuff to be published, and you have to, do what we do, present it to the public online. So anyway, Geraint has performed his own set of experiments now. And
yeah, I've performed a series of experiments. The latest one is one in a vacuum chamber where I've put a black plate in the vacuum chamber, heated it by a 100-watt bulb, and then done a comparison between a flat plate on its own with a flat plate with a glass jar on it. I was going to do a greenhouse, but I had some problems, and the glass kept breaking whenever I was drilling it, so I had to settle some coffee jars.
Right. So you performed an experiment. Sorry, we had a cutout there. I'm sorry, I may have missed something. It's okay. But you performed an experiment a second time. Didn't you have to perform some experiments?
Yeah, what I've done several types of experiments, but so the latest experiment is the one I just explained, where the black plate and the comparison with a black plate with a glass jar on the top of it.
Yeah.
And I did that like about a dozen times, and I recorded 3 of the results, which I submitted to PSI, which they printed on the website. And I also did a separate YouTube recording of the whole 2.5 hours, just so people could see that's live, and it wasn't some kind of trick, that actually that is what happens when you perform this test. And if you believe the radiation greenhouse effect postulates, then you would say that back radiation from the glass jar would cause the temperature of the plate to rise, and that it clearly didn't. So that's the basis of the experiment. I've done other experiments previously. I've done one where you have an exposed filament, and then you that exposed filament in the same vacuum chamber, you add carbon dioxide to it, and if this radiation greenhouse effect was real, you would expect the temperature of that filament to rise, and then a visible effect of that would be a bright filament, but it doesn't, it dims. And I've done some previous ones as well where I've had a glass bulb and I've added argon and I've added CO2 and I've added just air and then compared the three and found CO2 and argon were very similar. They were both warmer than the air, but argon was also warmer than the air, and argon isn't an IR gas. So
yeah,
there are other properties in gases which can cause the same effect, and it's nothing really to do with back radiation, which is causing that heat effect.
yes, absolutely. Yeah. So this greenhouse effect, this climate greenhouse effect idea, is this idea that it's the idea that the cold atmosphere, like you can go outside and you can feel the air is cold, but this cold air is actually making you hot. Like that's how ridiculous this theory is. That's the greenhouse effect. You go outside in the cold air, and the cold air is actually making you hot. That's the basis of climate science.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
It's absolutely ridiculous. So this one article I'd seen, you had to repeat a second time because I saw this criticism that was being offered by the alarmists that you didn't perform the initial experiment long enough. And so I was ridiculing them because I was saying, so you know, now their argument is saying that if you perform an experiment for the greenhouse effect, you'll only find the experimental results when you stop the experiment. Is basically
yeah.
Argument, right?
I think that one was with two plates. So I had a plate, and apparently the back radiation theory was real. If you put a plate behind a plate, the second plate will cause the first plate to rise in temperature when you have the heat on this side. But it doesn't, and I did a test showing that, and then people say if you do it for longer you'll get the results, but I already did a test which was actually much longer than the one that was published on PSI, and if you do it longer you don't get the results. And it's the same with I did the same thing here with this greenhouse. So on the first experiment with just a flat plate, I did it for an hour and I got a temperature which was far in excess of the one with the glass jar. And I left that for 90 minutes, and you can leave it all day and you'll never get a higher temperature with the one with the glass jar because of radiation greenhouse effect isn't real. Yeah. So,
well, this is the sort of specious argument we always get. I mean, and this has gone just into absurd level territory. Yeah. So basically, you'll only find your experimental results after you've stopped the experiment. You know, they expect some sort of step function, so you can run the experiment for hours, but only after you stop the experiment, that's when you would have seen the results, and it would have been a step function where all of a sudden they kick in. Like, it's just so ridiculous. These people are so freaking stupid and ridiculous. Anyway, so would you like to share your screen? You can quickly.
Okay, yeah, let's share the screen. This is the document which was printed on PSI.
Sure.
So this is the experiment. So that's the experimental unit. I originally got this one to do a comparison with the exposed filaments, where I would have that chamber exposed to CO2 in this chamber not exposed to CO2. So you could see the difference between CO2 and not CO2. And I've been using the same unit for various other tests. And on this one, I'm doing a test with the black plate here, with a glass jar heated by a 100-watt bulb underneath, with a simple thermometer connected, digital thermometer connected to this device over here. Yeah, and I'm simply comparing it with a flat plate. So the flat plate has no contact with the jar. It's separated by the bulb separated by 10 mil underneath. Both of them are heated in an identical manner. So on the very first one, it's just a flat plate by itself. Left that for an hour, and I've got 3 different sets of results in each of the 3 tests. Yeah. Roughly similar, around 290 degrees. And on the one on the YouTube live, I got 298 degrees, which is roughly similar still. Yeah, and then I did a graph, and you can see they're identical.
Yeah. So what should you have seen if there was a radiative greenhouse effect, as climate science claims? So what should we have saw?
Right. What we should have seen happen. Yeah. Okay. What we should have seen happen if there was a radiation greenhouse effect is that the temperature of that plate should have risen if I had the glass jar, and it didn't. I was expecting if it was real, then maybe that would go to 320, maybe 330. You know, it would possibly heat faster as well. Because I keep getting told radiation greenhouse effect, one of its effects is it heats things up faster than if it wasn't there, as it slows down the rate of cooling, so it acts like a layer of insulation. And I've never seen that effect occur in any of my tests at all, and it's not present on this one either. So
Yeah, show us
here
the
we're
next
getting
plot.
after an hour 270, 270, 270, and on the one on the YouTube after 90 minutes it got to 268. It actually got to 268 after about 50 minutes, and it just stayed there because that's its maximum steady state. And the reason for that is, if people are wondering, is because the absorption area has remained the same, so the rate of heat input is identical as to the first experiment, but because there is physical contact with this on the glass of that glass jar, it's basically acting like a radiator. So you're now increasing the rate of heat loss from that plate, and back radiation effect is just non-existent. It doesn't exist. If I left this all day, it would still be around 270. It doesn't change.
Do you have a plot of those results?
Yeah, there's a plot of results underneath. There we go. And
Great.
the three are roughly similar because they're done under similar conditions.
Yeah, so as I've shown via the mathematical calculations, via the theory in my own writing and work, I've shown that the effects should be very obvious. I mean, we're not talking about a fraction of a degree or some noise. The effects should be huge. And yeah, go scroll back up to that plot.
Yeah, okay.
That current plot, let's see that. Yeah, and that effect should be kicking in right away. It should right away start increasing above the line there and going.
Yeah,
well.
That's what you would expect.
Yeah, it would be
you would
very,
expect
very
a
obvious.
very steep curve, and you would expect a higher temperature at the top. So
yeah,
and so, both of those things don't display.
Yeah, and then so again, just for the humor of it, because I like this kind of, well, no, I don't like this humor. I actually hate it. But yeah, so their claim was that, you know, the greenhouse effect would have kicked in only after you turned off the experiment.
So yeah, I've had people say that on other experiments where I've used flat plates. It would have happened if I'd let it run for longer.
Utterly ridiculous. I like that. The guys, people, this is the level of debate we're having with these freaks, with these scientists, with these climate alarm believing people, these frauds. They're such frauds, amazing frauds. Anyway, this is a beautiful plot. I love that result. So which line would we have seen? So you have a blue line, a red line, and a green line. Which one would have taken off?
So these are 3 separate tests. So I've done 3 identical tests with the greenhouse on it, and then 3 tests without the greenhouse. So you'd have expected any of those to just be much higher. So if you did it concurrently, each test, which I did, you'd have expected test 3 to be the highest because all the equipment is already pre-warmed up. Whereas on the first one, you would expect it to be the coolest because it's got a cold start. But the effect is really small. So on the third test, it was like a degree higher than the first test. So
those already warmed
there's not much in it. But yeah, the problem with this greenhouse effect, though, is that although it's fake, it's everywhere. Councillors believe in it, politicians believe in it, they've written taxes for it, written legislation to hit net carbon zero. It's quite a problem we have.
Yeah, it's quite ridiculous. And I've been showing my own, I've been trying to publish my own papers in scientific journals. Like, I'm an astrophysicist. I publish in the highest rated astrophysics journals in the world. There is no highest ratings. I've written papers solving 100-year-old problems in astrophysics. So for climate science, I'm trying to submit a paper to some science journals, physics journals, climate science journals, basically demonstrating, telling them, like, look, you've made a pretty simple mistake here. You've written the sun out of the climate because you're using this flat Earth model, and basically you're writing the sun out, and you've created this alternative idea of back radiation greenhouse effect. So here's why it's wrong. And then I have presented another model. So I've created a spherical model showing that the sunshine is quite hot and warm, and sunshine creates the climate directly. You don't need a back radiation greenhouse effect to create the climate, where you've assumed that the sun doesn't do it. You know, the sun creates the climate directly. And these people, these are people with PhDs in physics, and they literally write back to me, the editors of journals. They literally write back to me and say, we're not qualified to vet the difference. And they say this journal, it's a physics journal, it's a basic physics journal. These ones, they're publishing basic physics, basic science, pedagogy, all sorts of things. And they tell me that they're not qualified to vet the difference between a spherical Earth model with sunshine falling on half the planet versus a flat Earth model with sunshine falling on the entire planet at once as an input. That's what they tell me. They say, we can't publish your paper because we don't know how to vet this. It's like, are you kidding me?
That's some problem. I've got similar problems with I've written to counsellors, and some of them tell me that they've got PhDs in physics and things like that, and maybe they do. But if they have, it clearly hasn't been an adequate enough education for them to understand that it's just not real. And when I submit documents like this to them, they still just come back and they don't believe me. And it's just like,
there's some sort of strange force at there's some sort of strange force at work. You know, these people have been called midwits. They're the middling, upper middling IQ of around 120, and it's a really dangerous area. I don't know what it is wrong, what's wrong with these people, but they can't think the most basic things. I mean, I've had to postulate on my blog with people. I've had to go to crazy places and be like, are these people robots? Like, not really.
They just won't accept they're wrong, will they?
I can't accept that they're human. Like, I mean, or they are, and it's just a statement as to how bad things are for us. But what are these people? And you know, with you know, even with the climate scientists, with Roy Spencer is one. Are you familiar with Roy Spencer?
I have heard of him, and I've seen his website. Is that the What's Up website, or is there?
No, he's a different fellow. I think he publishes something. But anyway, I was discussing things with him, and I was trying to tell him, you know, you shouldn't be spreading the sunshine over the entire surface of the Earth as an input, because that's not what sunshine does. It only falls on half the planet at any given time. And when you use the correct math for that, you find that sunshine is really hot and can create the climate directly instead of really cold. And then he responds to me, he says, nobody thinks that the Earth is flat and that sunshine falls over the entire Earth at once. And then he goes, what we do is we average the solar input over the surface of the Earth as an average input.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's what I just said you shouldn't do. And he says, well, that's what we do. And if you can't understand basic geometry, then you know, he calls me some names and stuff and stops talking to me. And I'm like, no, I do understand basic geometry. Do you understand that sunshine falls on a hemisphere, not on a whole sphere? like who, you have to be some sort of robot or crazy person. I don't know.
I actually think there are experimental ways of getting over that kind of problem as well. I'm thinking I might do a test similar to this with a sphere, and I'm also thinking I might do a test with this exact same greenhouse, but with an IR transparent chamber, because people tell me, oh, it's the chamber that's doing it. And I know it's not. And then I'm also thinking of doing like a refrigerated version of the chamber as well. And then there's other ways of doing it, which you could do it in like a satellite testing chamber, and that replicates space. So that would be the perfect test. But that's very expensive, so that's something different.
Sure. All right, so that's pretty much it for. Is there anything else you want to present about?
No, that's all. That would be all.
Okay, you can stop the screen share then for now, and then we can.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. All right, so there's you know, pretty nice experimental results as we've had for hundreds of years. Of course, the alarmists never want to go to actual laboratory analysis of the actual basis of their physics. They just assume that it's true and won't allow any criticism, and then they simply interpret anything as human-induced climate change.
Yeah, I'm trying to get like live viewings. I'm going to start, I was thinking, in like churches and colleges and places like that, but also going to try and get live viewings at universities. I've tried a few near me, but haven't got any positive responses back yet. But
yeah,
hopefully I'm going to keep trying. If it does happen, then I think that'll be interesting, because I reckon a lot of people would never have seen something like this done before. And I can do this kind of thing anywhere, because my unit's portable. So
yeah, that's excellent.
I'm challenging them to let me do it. So hopefully one day they will.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. And like I said at the beginning, the experimental evidence has existed for hundreds of years that there is no demonstration of their physics. Lots of people have checked it in various ways. It would have been known. I mean, if you leave a pane of glass, what if you're installing windows in a house and you leave your double pane glass laying on the lawn? It should incinerate the glass
Yeah.
beneath it. I mean, it should get to several hundred degrees. You know, if you have 5 panes of glass, if you had 5 panes of glass, I mean, instead of using a magnifying glass for concentrating the sun's rays, you can just use panes of glass, parallel panes of glass. I mean, think
Triple
of how
glazing would
simple
be
a
deadly, wouldn't
device
it?
that would be. Yeah, exactly. And you could incinerate things just by having panes of glass stacked on top of each other. That's how it should work. And of course, you know, people found that magnifying glasses work, but anyway, the experimental has always been there. It's always been there. It's on our side. It's also ridiculous. We live in some sort of crazy, you familiar with the expression clown world yet?
Yes, climate clowns. That's the, and there's too many of them in power. That's what the problem is. It's exposing them is quite a task.
Well, you know, and then that's what I was going to conclude earlier about, yeah, where does this all lead? It all leads to this insane vilification of carbon dioxide, which is literally the molecule which creates life. It's literally the life molecule. We're all based on carbon. Carbon gets into DNA, into the biosphere via photosynthesis with carbon dioxide, sunlight, and water. That's how it works. That's the basis of life. And so they vilify this basis of life and want to tax us for it. I mean, it's really quite megalomaniacal. It's actually some sort of mad scientist, sort of insane, what do you call that? Like Dr. Evil kind of.
It is a little bit like that.
The James Bond villain kind of thing going on here. You know, it's psychotically insane. It's just like, yeah.
Yeah, I agree entirely.
All right, good. All right, well, anything else you want to add to that, or?
No, that's it for now.
All right,
I'll
well,
let you know in future if I do anything extra.
Perfect. Yes. Well, thanks for presenting that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for interviewing me. It's great meeting you.
You take care, Geraint. Okay, bye-bye.